Las Vegas is the next race on the calendar, and I thought it would be interesting to show some actual footage of the race setup recorded by myself. This doesn't happen very often, especially for me, but as I was recently in Las Vegas, I got to see the process of building up a street circuit, including looking at the pit buildings, which is a permanent building, but then also the race setup up close, or at least as close as I could get without security getting involved. I was there during the week of the 14th of October, and even though that was well over a month ahead of the race, they were already well into the race setup. The famous Bellagio fountains, well, they were completely obscured, annoyingly, by one of the main grandstands that's already up for when the cars go past the strip. We did get to see the fountains in action, but space was a lot more limited because that main standing area where that grandstand is where people would normally watch the fountains going off. That was taken up by the grandstands, which is probably quite annoying for people visiting temporarily. We stayed in the Paris Hotel, which was actually directly opposite the Bellagio, and I could see the work being done to the grandstand each day. Bit by bit, they were working on the top of them, apart from the day when we were leaving, when the weather picked up. The wind got pretty brutal, and it seemed to mess with some of their hard work. We could actually see the pit building from our hotel floor as well. It was actually at the back of the Paris Hotel. Those buildings are permanent, whereas most of the circuit is temporary. But before we get to the circuit itself, literally everywhere was selling F1 merch. As you can imagine, they're trying to shift as much as possible before the race weekend, and of course, on the race weekend as well. It was in the airport, and pretty much every shop I passed that had clothing in it had some sort of F1 merch for sale. It was the same offer as well. Buy one item, get the second 50% off. So it's some sort of universal deal. But they weren't cheap. $150 for a Ferrari t-shirt? Just a casual $60 for a Mercedes beanie? Yeah, sure, I'll take two. At least the Red Bull shirts were only $88. Must have been the Sergio Perez version. I thought at first maybe they were trying to shift some merch from last year, and maybe some of it was surplus, water bottles, that sort of thing. But there was definitely lots of 2024 branded stuff there as well. Water bottles, hats, pens, cups, anything. You name it, it was on sale. The usual stuff that tourists might buy. Even Formula One boxer shorts. I saw these at a CVS. That's a pharmacy. Wonder how many they've sold. Anyway, let's take a look at the circuit itself, starting with the pit buildings. There was a ton of work already going on here, but the main building is permanent. It was only built a couple of years ago, so it still looks new, it still looks modern. It looks really nice. The rest of the setup, though, and grandstands aren't permanent, so it's still an incredible undertaking to get ready for the Grand Prix in one of the busiest cities in the world. At this point, I was standing on what was turn 17, the final corner, the road that darts left leading to the pit straight. It's still open to traffic, not the pit straight itself, but the road adjacent. So I got pretty close to the building and the pit straight itself that was fenced off. Technically, I was standing on the grid. At least that's what I'm going to tell myself. This camera angle from the race is pretty much where I was standing. Maybe I can get the job waving the green flag. I'd love that. The barriers they put down for the street circuits, they look so different when they don't have branding on them. As you can probably expect, you may notice as we walk around that some of them look misaligned. The brandings are the wrong way around, but before each Grand Prix, they actually redo all of the graphics on these barriers anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I was tempted a few times to try and sneak into the pit building. There was security guards at pretty frequent intervals, and I can't imagine they take too kindly to that sort of thing in Las Vegas, so it was probably best that I just kept myself to myself. The open gates and huge escalators were so inviting though, just asking to be run up. What's interesting about Vegas, and I'm not sure if this is the same with other street circuits, but I believe they reopen the roads for traffic in between sessions and on the day, so at least the locals aren't entirely inconvenienced for the entire weekend. It must be a nightmare having that level of work going on in a very, very busy city for what must be 2.5 months, essentially. If they're already well into setup in the middle of October, this is a long period, and I imagine that these items will be left standing for quite a long time after the race as well. So it's actually quite a prolonged period of inconvenience. I then headed round the corner for one of the other permanent parts of the circuit. Turns 1 and 2 are obviously in the secure area and they're permanent, so I couldn't get to those sadly. Last year, you may remember Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc both went off into the runoff at the start, and Carlos Sainz span around. It was incredibly slippery through that section. I did, however, get to turns 3 and 4, which are also permanent. It's incredibly important to get a good exit here because it heads down the long straight leading to the twisty sphere section, which also has a DRS zone as well. You can see the huge hospitality areas on the inside of the corner, as well as another grandstand on the other side of the road. Speaking of the sphere, I didn't actually go around the entire sphere area, but I did head down towards turn 5, which is where the circuit heads right and goes around that sphere complex and back towards the strip. As you can see, a significant amount of the track's lighting was already up at this point, and that was in mid-October, as the race obviously takes place at night. The sphere was something else. We didn't go inside because the tickets went up in price massively, and it just didn't seem worth it, but it was certainly a spectacle from outside. I saw it a few times with quite a few designs on it, including the well-known smiley face and the burger advert. Very expensive building just to advertise burgers, but hey-ho. It also looks very odd during the day because you can actually see the design of the structure rather than the LEDs. Now I've been to Vegas and experienced it, it would have been a travesty really to have the race take place during the day. I imagine that was never really a consideration. Vegas at night with all the lights looks incredible. We went up the Eiffel Tower viewing platform and you had a perfect view of the strip which the cars will be heading down. It looks incredible at night. The main strip was resurfaced before the race last year, but the rest of the roads are still reasonably bumpy. I could just about make out the F1 logo on top of the pit building as well, which is already lit up. I guess they're not saving electricity. We also headed down to what I would consider to be the last real corner, but it's actually turns 14, 15 and 16. This is after a very long drag down the Las Vegas Boulevard. You then hit the brakes hard for turn 14 and it's a small left before heading down towards the final real corner and pit straight. Pretty much all of the main concrete barriers are down, so again, a bit of a nightmare for the locals. This is where Charles Leclerc sent it on Sergio Perez last year on the very last lap. Absolute scenes. Then this is Harmon Avenue towards the pit straight. You take a hard left at the end of this section, although it's flat out for an F1 car. Past a huge grandstand on the left hand side. It was actually quite interesting to be quite close to this grandstand and just appreciate how big they actually are. Those fences on the right though, they're not part of the Formula 1 circuit. That's actually Topgolf. Not even I could hook a ball over that fence and onto the Formula 1 circuit. I would give it a good try though. I'm not sure what the Vegas Grand Prix will offer this year, because last year I wasn't expecting anything good. The layout wasn't exciting, but the race was reasonably entertaining. The insane speeds they were doing, sometimes 3 wide down the strip, was definitely something to see, and the pictures were incredible. In terms of marketing, it's a moneymaker. Vegas though, not really for me. I loved seeing it and experiencing what it had to offer, but I wouldn't be interested in going back there anytime soon. Unless I was given Formula 1 tickets, of course, which would never happen. But I'd clearly head back for that.